feel like Kobe in the fourth quarter.
This is the DaneMoore NBA podcast brought to you by Prize Picks, coming at you Thursday afternoon. It's September 25th, and today is one of my favorite pods of the entire year. Britt Robson from MinPost will be joining me here in a few minutes to discuss his 75-minute Q&A with Chris Finch. These Britt Q&As are a longtime staple of Wolves content, as I'm sure many of you listening know. But some background quick on what this is. Britt has covered the Wolves since their inception. He's been covering this team as long as I've been alive. So for many, many years, he's been doing this preseason Q&A with different coaches of the Wolves. I think, thinking about this morning, I think one of the first things I ever read by Britt was his Q&A with Sam Mitchell, which would have been, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago or something like that. Every year, I feel like this article sets the scene for the season. It's always the first time we hear from Finch after the offseason has kind of come to a close. And while, we spend the whole summer, I spend the whole summer, guessing how the players that they've added over the summer will fit in or what they're going to lose, what they've lost, all those sort of things. That's all speculative. And then Finch's comments come in to Britt, and they always point us in the direction of how things are actually going to go in this Q&A. Not as much roster turnover, but he does that with Rob Dillingham in particular, Terrence Shannon Jr., and even Johan Berenger. These Q&As are just loaded with all sorts of hints and tweaks that Finch is going to make this year. I thought this year's was particularly loaded from a basketball standpoint. So what I would say is stop listening to this right now. Go read the Q&A. I know you might think we'll summarize it all. We'll try, but I do think you're going to want to read it to get the full quotes from Finch. MinPost, where Britt writes, is free, no paywall there. The article is a transcription of a 75-minute interview. So on MinPost, you'll see it broken up into 4 different parts on their website. They've been coming out one day at a time, Tuesday through Friday this week. So if you're listening to this on Thursday night, this part 1, after it publishes early Friday morning, that 4th and final part of the interview won't yet be out. But by Friday afternoon, all 4 parts of this Q&A will be published at MinPost, and this podcast, part 1 and part 2 of it will also be out. I did split this into 2 episodes because it's going to take us 2 hours to get through all 4 parts of it. Britt and I are going to, do the part 1 and part 2. So obviously this is part 1 right now. And then the plan is to have part 2 of the podcast come out on Friday morning. So you got all that? 4 parts to the article and 2 parts to the podcast. I'm sorry if that's annoying for you, but I on the pod side, I didn't want to try and jam it all into just 1 hour of podcasting. So we split it up into 2. Coming up on this episode, what do we get in? We're going to get into here. We'll talk about continuity and just kind of priorities for camp coming up that they have. What else do I have written down to talk about? We're going to talk about the point guard position, Finch's comments on that, and then just overall some paths to offensive improvement. And then part 2, we'll come around and we'll get Finch's, talk about Finch's thoughts on coaching Anthony Edwards. He talks about the rotation a little bit, some on Randall and DiVincenzo in year 2 and all those sort of things. So it's loaded a ton of stuff here. Let's do it. It's the Finch Q&A with Britt. Let's go. Today's show is brought to you by Falling Knife Brewing Company. And if you have questions listening to this that you would like to have answered by Britt about this Q&A or just the Wolves in general, come out to Wolves Fest at Falling Knife Brewing Company on October 18th. Britt, Kyle, and I will be doing a live show as part of Wolves Fest from 5 to 6, maybe 6:30 p.m. that night. It'll be, one big final season preview pod or whatever before the Wolves season gets underway. And we'll be sure to leave plenty of time for anyone in attendance to grab a mic and ask us a question there. Wolves Fest, it's always a blast. It actually goes from 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. that Saturday. We'll be there the whole time hanging out. The pod is just from 5 to 6 there. A bunch of Wolves themed pop-ups, bunch of gear, art, all those sort of things. And like I've been saying, the Nas Reed tattoo guy, Pack Tats, will be there. So sure, get a Nas Reed tat at Wolves Fest. Why not? We'll also be releasing our new beer in partnership with Falling Knife. It's called Second Apron. just mark it all down. We'd love to see you there if you can make it. October 18th, 3 to 9 p.m. Wolves Fest at Falling Knife Brewing Company. That's Falling Knife Brewing Company in Northeast Minneapolis.
Hey, yeah.
All right, we are now joined by Britt Robson from MimPost. Britt, before you came on, I briefly explained a little bit of the history of you doing these Q&As with Finch, but other previous head coaches of the Wolves. I think listeners would probably, well, one, want a little bit of background of how this came to be, but two, even just kind of like the setting. What does this look like when you sit down with Finch for like an hour and a half and just talk hoop?
Since they moved into Mayo, and I don't know what, the first one I ever did with Finch was in Las Vegas at his very palatial hotel suite with a wet bar and a very large
See, I
bed
convinced
in
you
the
to come to
corner,
Summer
and
League, and you did a really
yeah,
cool
you took
article.
me to Summer League, whatever that was, 21 maybe?
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
not
whatever.
good.
I mean, Finch took over for Ryan in the middle of the season, so we obviously didn't do one then, but then we've done one ever since. And I initially did it thinking that, you know, we'll see what happens. I just wanted to introduce him to people, get into like his methods and stuff. And it worked out really well. And on the elevator going down, you know, from like the 78th floor or whatever it was, he said, Mark Stein told me that you were a good guy. And I don't know whether or not he would have done as, you know, we did an hour then too. And I was just one of those things where you kind of keep checking the tape recorder to hope you're getting everything because he's being so frank about things, you know.
Right.
And then I found out that's just standard operating procedure for him. But so shout out to Mark Stein, who I think when he left ESPN or got bounced from ESPN or something, I told him he ought to write a book that I enjoy his writing.
Mhm.
And, you know, I had enjoyed his writing, and, you know, we kind of knew each other that way. But
You guys
I think
were
he knew
power
him
rankers.
he
back
knew
in
him
the
from
day.
England. Yeah, actually, that's true. Another thing. Yeah, he
When
was.
you were
also,
at Sports Illustrated, right? You were doing
I
power
was at
rankings.
Sports
And
Illustrated. He was at
Yeah.
ESPN, and the best one was always John Schumann at NBA.com, which he remains.
Yeah.
He's the GOAT of power rankings. The guy is fantastic. But anyway, did it then, went really well. Humbly asked him if we could do it a second year. And by then, I think the Mayo building was up, whatever. So it's in his office. He calls the time. He never says there's a time limit on it. 2 years ago, I think I went like 80 minutes or something and didn't realize how long I'd gone. And so now I just don't pay attention. There was one time in the middle of the Monday talk where he seemed distracted by something outside. And I said, you got something that you need to go? He goes, oh, no. So he's just, the guy's just aces in terms of, you know, whatever anybody regards him as a coach or any of that stuff. When it comes to being a willing and incredibly helpful participant in these interviews, he's just been fantastic.
I think it's really helpful. I was talking to you about this before we started. It's helpful for me, and I think it's helpful for all of us who write or talk about the Wolves, or even just people who, you know, are talking with their friends about the Wolves in the season. I think if we don't get this from Finch, then we are left to our own devices. You know what I mean? For like a month to be like, well, this is what I think we should talk about and what we should be going on here. And this now, I mean, I've been doing this for a long time with my pod. This leads like a month of my stuff. I'm going, all right, I haven't done something about Jalen Clark. Did Britt and Finch go talk about Jalen Clark? Because it's, I mean, and we get to talk to him during training camp and stuff too. And he's always a good question answerer, but he's, I think, particularly ready, maybe particularly not fed up with us. You know what I'm saying? He's like, it's the first time he's talked to anyone.
He's working through stuff too. Now, last year got screwed because it was before the cat interview. I mean, before the cat trade.
Yeah, that wasn't
and
great.
that screwed a lot of things.
Yeah.
But he's back to his old hits. You know, he's got Nas at the 3 and Jaden being a playmaker, which he wanted to do before the cat trade, and that got screwed up. So that was interesting. And, you know, it's funny. I also, I think it's a chance for him to think out loud, you know, for one thing. And then the other thing is, I do think that it's a public service in that it gets diehard Timberwolves people, myself, yourself included, interested in what's going on and sets a context. Like I thought, quite frankly, I was going to talk about Dante DiVincenzo as getting a decent, if not the lion's share of the point guard minutes.
John and I did that on Friday, and we did a whole thing. I'm like, oh, you like think it's going to be? And then John said it, and I'm like, okay, well, maybe Dante's going to start. And then the Finch thing, it doesn't sound like Dante's going to start.
No, and doesn't sound like Dante, if in a perfect world, is going to get a lot of point guard minutes.
Right.
And I also think even if he does, and we'll talk about what he said about Rob later, but he really does think that a lot of the initiation of the offense will be Ant and Randall, especially when Conley's off the floor.
Yeah, no, which is the alternate sort of theory there.
Exactly.
Or it's at least what you tell yourself of when you don't have a lot of point guards on the roster.
He's apt to change his mind. We'll see how many minutes Nas gets at the three. As he talked further about that, he began to realize there's so many people he wants to give minutes to.
Right.
And,
okay, well, let's start with your first question to him that lays the context, which was just priorities for training camp. He talked about leaning in on continuity, was one of them. Second unit defense, the non-Rudy minutes, and then 3, becoming better in close games.
Right.
Talk about all 3 of them. Which one of those stood out to you most, his answers on that?
Well, I think that the continuity one was something I thought we'd get clearer about. I thought we got off to a rough start, quite frankly, because I was kind of expecting him to hit that answer out of the park because he's usually so good at explaining himself. And I thought that was 2 processes. And instead he was trying to think about, the thorns. He didn't talk about process so much as he talked about chronology. It was a little different. I didn't get a lot of inside insight. That comes later, frankly. I mean, he does talk about dealing with Julius Randle and how, that process happened. He talks about Ant, but I thought one of the ways that was going to be a good opening question was it would be a context setter about other people, specific relationships with players. And that didn't happen as much. So there was that. But then when we got into the non-Rudy minutes and certainly the closing games things, those were 2 things that irked him.
Well, look, to the continuity one, let me tell you how I read.
Yeah, okay.
I'm not in the room there.
I have a really high bar for these interviews now because they've always gone so well.
Right. And for the record, it went well. And it's like anything when you paint your own piece of art or you sing or whatever, like people are like, you don't think your own is good.
Right.
It was good. It was extremely, informative. My read on the continuity thing was him saying, we were really good in the ways we needed to be really good have improved the final 20 games of the season and into the playoffs.
That is so. Yeah, they went 17-4 and it was, mediocre competition, but they sustained, they beat discombobulated Lakers team and an injured Curry Warriors team, but they sustained a very high level of play from the time Julius came back until they ran in OKC, and that was a juggernaut that even though
it was a juggernaut.
Yeah,
enough said. The 17-4 over those final 21 games of the season. I looked it up this morning. They were 4th on offense in that time, 122 offensive rating. That's really high. 7th on defense, 4th in net rating. I was like, okay, well, what's 122 on offense and 112 on defense, which they were that period of time. That's almost exactly the numbers of the Cavs and the Celtics last year, both 60-win teams.
Right.
So Finch is saying, look at what we did. We not only won 17 of the 21 games against mediocre competition, like you said, but we were playing, in a almost top 5 on both sides of the ball type of way. And specifically, Julius Randle was playing the way that he had envisioned Julius Randle playing months back in the, months back when they acquired him.
I think it was a vindication season for Finch.
Sure.
I mean, and he does talk near the end of the interview about he stuck with that 8 because he needed to get things fixed. He needed to get things on the right page. And I do think a lot of the things he was questioned for, rightly so, I ripped him for playing Randall the way he did for most of the season until I couldn't anymore because he was right. But I do think it was a very, very capable season for him. He once again, if you take a team to the conference finals 2 years in a row and you don't have the continuity that they've been totally overhauled, upholstered like twice in a 3-year period.
Major way. Yeah.
And so that's a hell of a job coaching, which he won't, bray about, but I think low key he was saying, yeah, we did what I was hoping and I thought we could do.
Julius in those 21 games averaged 18 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists. Actually, I don't know if the 7 or 5 is rebounds or assists, but it was 18, 7, and 5.
Right.
He shot 40% from 3 and 59% from 2. That's good numbers and elite efficiency on real usage. The only players in the league to shoot 40% from 3 and 60% from 2 for all of last season are Nikola Jokic, Domantas Sabonis, Keon Ellis, Peyton Pritchard, and Sam Hauser. So it's 3 low usage, role players.
Ones and 2 quality bigs. Right?
Yeah, who didn't shoot. I don't think Jokic or Sabonis probably shot as many threes per game as Julius did. But that point being, that's an extremely high level of scoring efficiency that Julius had. You roll it over to the playoffs, and he was 24, 6, and 6 in the first 2 rounds.
Right.
Pre-Juggernaut Thunder, 35% from 3, and again 59% from 2. And I'm sure I looked those numbers up at the time, but if he can keep that 59% from 2 piece of it,
right,
because now you're that force by the basket
and stay in the over average. I don't need him to be
40.
I don't need him to be 40% from deep, but if he is 37, 38 from deep,
right,
35 because he has yo-yoed in the past, and it looked like he was going to do it again this in the first half of this year. But the thing that impressed me most, quite frankly, is the defense. The upgrade in defense, that was a buy-in to this team that had nothing to do with contract, because he was a known commodity on all the good things. If he had just sustained all those scoring numbers, he would have been the Julius Randle to hit free agency no worse and perhaps a little better, even without the defense, because he never really played defense that well. The fact that I thought was the second best guy at checking bigs behind Rudy on the roster, that was a revelation, and that was incredibly helpful to this team.
I mean, because they had that in Cat the year before.
Exactly.
As Cat's not known for his defense, but he was another big body there, and obviously the Denver series and all those sort of things. He did fill that in. So I took the continuity. I guess I'd summarize it as this: maybe continuity wasn't the word, but he was relying on carryover,
right?
Of what was working at the end of last season. And he said that's, we kind of know who we need to be. We saw what that looked like at the end of last season. I wouldn't expect us to spend or need a lot of time trying to figure out what that looks like, but continuity is
right. In other words, you've done it to the extent, that we needed it done. Now just remember and repeat. But then that's why the other 2 priorities are in there.
Yeah.
They did not play well with Rudy off the floor often, and they were terrible in clutch. I mean, it was very clearly probably the biggest. They had, I think, I read somewhere they had a Pythagorean one loss of 57 wins.
And that's because if you even are average in clutch time, you're going to
win those games.
Exactly.
I mean, they looked at the net rating and kind of computed it out. Their net rating and all their metrics compared to the other team were much better, but they weren't much better because they won the blowouts and then lost the close ones.
Well, I have the clutch stuff up here right now. They were bottom 10 in clutch time, which is the last 5 minutes of the game,
and grew
under
a little
5
bit
points.
From that, they were like bottom three, I think, for quite a while.
It finished 20th on offense and clutch, 24th in defense, and in the clutch. And it's not the teams you want to be. It's Utah and Portland, and Phoenix and stuff like that down there. So that's I think that probably ties to Ant and some of the different ways they want to use him this year. Ant's growth there. That's somewhat intuitive to me of how that can improve with maturity, kind of, rounding the edges of the thing. The non-Rudy minutes one doesn't have a clear solve for me. And it was egregious, last season, where Rudy on the court, 108.6 defensive rating, Rudy off the court, 116.3. That's like the equivalent of the number 2 defense. And the other one, him off the floor, is the equivalent of the 20th best defense.
Right.
You go a year before, I didn't realize this. They obviously led the league in defensive rating. So unsurprisingly, when Rudy was on the floor, 107.8 would be better than the best in the league. But then when Rudy was off the floor, it was 111.3, which was better than every other team in the league too. There was, I mean, that's a drop off,
right?
But you didn't drop from elite to average. You would drop from elite to a small step below elite with that Cat team and Kyle Anderson and stuff like that. But I was
about to say Kyle Anderson, Mike Conley, 2 off the top of my head that I would say where
Jaden
Mike Conley is aging is Finch calls him an elite chase guy, and I would say he's degraded to being a good chase guy now, which is still not bad at 37 or whatever, because that's a lot of work. But
great job on Buddy Hield in that Warriors series.
That's actually a very good reminder. But I do think his regular season defensive performance was a downgrade from the year before quite a bit.
Right.
And I think that not having Kyle Anderson, who was just spectacular at knowing when to wait for opponents to do their thing before they did it. And then, I do think that even Chenzo and Julius had something to do with that, especially early with Julius. And Dante wasn't fantastic. He was up and down. He was great at being a disruptor, but as a team defender, he wasn't fantastic.
Right. Today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks, and with the weekend approaching, that means it's time to put together a Prize Picks lineup for this week's slate of NFL games. And I've got 2 I like for this weekend slate. Give me Alvin Kamara more than 3.5 receptions, and Ken Walker to have less than 13.5 rushing attempts. If you're a fantasy football nerd like me, this is great. You just look through there and you can make your picks based on player usage and yardage and all those sort of things you're already thinking about with fantasy football. Anyways, you can take a stand on those. I don't know, maybe you just want to have something else going on the Vikings game. Jordan Addison, more than 2.5 receptions. They have a Jalen Hurts free square going on this weekend. There's always something going on over at Prize Picks. As always, a reminder to put together a lineup at Prize Picks. All you need to do is put 2 or more picks in your lineup to win. If you don't have a Prize Picks account yet, all you got to do is put in the promo code Dane when you sign up, and you will receive $50 in lineups when you play your first $5 lineup. That's prizepicks.com or the Prize Picks app using promo code Dane. Today's show is also brought to you by Adriana Lanick at Coldwell Banker Realty. And if it is time to start buying or selling your home, you need to go to thedancingrealtor.com, or you can call or text Adriana at 715-304-9920 to book a free strategy session. Look, I know not all of you are trying to buy or sell a home, but many of you have with Adriana. So we're, as always, just keeping this on your mind. If you're buying or selling, set up a free consultation with Adriana to get the ball rolling and figure out what it is that you need to do to make this happen. The perk, as always, that we have is you sign up for one of these free consultations and we'll enter you to win some free Wolves tickets. Again, dancingrealtor.com is her website, or you can call or text her at 715-304-9920 to book that free strategy session. Like I said, mention this podcast, get entered to win free Timberwolves tickets when you book that free consultation. Right. Let's move to the point guard position. That was another thing in the first one as we're talking about Mike. The first thing he says to you about Mike is, quote, he had a great year, which is hint number 1
Yes.
Don't
yeah, without
expect a
doubt.
lot of change at the point guard
And
position.
statistically, that is accurate, though.
Yep.
I mean, Mike did have a really good year, particularly after he started horribly. He had a wrist problem, which Finch wants to put almost all the problems on, but is somewhat accurate in that. What does Mike Conley use his right wrist for more than anything else? Floaters. And what was Mike Conley's biggest problem last year? He could not hit his patented floater, which was reliable up till then. So that isn't necessarily nonsense, what is being said about that. Conley's 3-point percentage in the second 2/3 or the 2/3 of the season after the first third was over 40% yet again. The difference was figuring out Randall instead of Cat, because Randall hogs the ball and he's really good about it. You know, he should have the ball a lot. He proved that. But he didn't know how to integrate at that point. And he was actively hurting that starting lineup in the first 20 games or so, I think.
Sure.
And more than anybody, he was hurting Jaden McDaniels, who was stuck being a catch and shoot 3-point shooter, and Mike Conley, who suddenly was not, he was like the third playmaker on the floor. Mike Conley, the quintessential, excepting maybe Chris Paul, the quintessential point guard in the NBA right now, didn't have a role. And so I think that had a lot to do with this performance. Age-wise, I do think defense remains a concern, though, and I think that is something that but, you know, if Rob is the second string point guard, it's the exact same problem, only a little worse.
Yeah, I agree with that. We talked about that at times, you know, throughout the season with Mike. And I do think sometimes we do this thing with all sports, right? And the guy gets older and then it's like a confirmation bias of like something. Yeah. I say that to mean, I don't think they would grade Mike's defense the way we graded it. I think they thought he played better defense last year than the way we talked about it.
But what I would counter, and first of all, obviously, if they really believe that, they know more than I do. But I would argue that there were a lot of adjustments made to make sure that Mike wasn't isolated.
100%.
And that takes away from team defense. If you can say, oh, Mike's got him.
Yeah.
That's a very different than saying, Mike, Amen Thompson has got Mike in the low block. Yeah. Let's scramble. It's, you know, classic NBA knowledge. A weak link in the offense makes the a weak link in the defense makes the defense suspect in the other four slots to some extent.
Right. Yeah, no, and he can be a great chase defender, and he was the best chase defender, but
and if he's got Buddy Hield on him who doesn't post up,
sure,
then yeah,
that's ideal. The shift at the point guard position last season obviously came when Finch went to Dante DiVincenzo for 7 games before DiVincenzo got hurt as the quote-unquote starting point guard next to Ant back there. Finch said to you, quote, I think that was something that happened at the time because we needed it just to shake up the team a little bit. Another quote, I like him better off ball, which, again, tea leaves to that suggests I would be surprised.
Also, why it worked, because Julius became more of a playmaker is what his rationale was. Once you had Dante in for Conley, Randall felt more comfortable not worrying about Conley's touches because, you know, they're in that locker room together. Everybody knows what the status of Mike Conley is on that team. And if you're hindering Mike Conley and you're the new guy, you know, all of a sudden that problem is removed. Mike Conley isn't starting anymore, and the guy you played with in New York is. So I do think there are good reasons why it worked, but Finch does not think, I think, just reading the tea leaves, as you say, that he doesn't have a lot of faith in Dante DiVincenzo being the kind of guy who can deliver the ball and run the offense for a championship contending team on a regular basis.
That does seem clear of what his stance is on that. He also made it clear that it's really tricky to play Mike Conley for 24 minutes a game and to start him, though. So there's rock and hard place.
Right. Yeah. I think he will. But I do think that does leave a lot of second and third quarter. Maybe what happens is that he doesn't start the third quarter.
Like the coming out of halftime. Yeah. And
save it for the fourth,
Yeah. my general, just my opinion on it is I think you get a better version of Mike Conley if he plays
with Rudy.
Well, I'm just longer shit. I mean, yes, with Rudy,
right.
I think he helps Rudy, but I think there was so many times that Mike was, starting the game, he played for 4, maybe 5 minutes, and then he'd get pulled, and you come back in, you play him for 4 or 5 minutes at like the, in the second quarter there. I think Mike would benefit from playing an 8-minute shift, but you can't go 8 minutes in the first quarter, 8 minutes in the second quarter, 8, now he's playing 32 minutes. You don't want to do that. So I get that's tricky and funky, and they're going to need to figure out the rotation around it. But it sounds like they want to figure out how to make a rotation where Mike is, if not the starter, still a very primary part of the point guard position, and the primary point guard.
I think, especially after semi-ripping him a little bit, I want to say that the resourcefulness of Mike Conley with a summer to think about how he can contribute. I mean, he was ambushed through no fault of anybody. It was the way the trade happened and the way things got going. But all of a sudden, his role was dramatically changed. He's had an opportunity to see how he absorbed that during the final 2/3 of the season. And he's now had a summer to think about it. Theoretically, his wrist, the chronic wrist problem he has, is not going to be bothering him as much. So on the plus side, I think you've got a really, really smart, resourceful guy with a lot more foreknowledge of the challenges that are going to be facing him. And I think that is one of the remedies I would imagine they're counting on.
And you gotta, I would imagine you gotta stay somewhat fluid in because if the wrist is bothering him, if it's a chronic wrist thing or whatever, and it pops back up at Thanksgiving, well, what Mike Conley looks like when his right wrist is bothering him. You have to give up on the finishing, the floater. That means you can't play him in 2-man game with Rudy as much because that's going to be a lob or a floater a lot of the time there. And now you're kind of, as we learned last season, the theoretical value you're getting of Mike Conley, which is large, greatly diminishes there. There's also, maybe it's not the wrist, 38. There's just sometimes tires pop, and we'll
absolutely. That's the thing. I mean, everybody kind of waits to see if, how will Mike dip and where will it happen?
Right.
It's easier to say he will. Where is not easy to say. And again, as somebody who has just now criticized his defense and acknowledged that he will dip, I do think he is somebody who will get the most out of the situation, especially now that he's more prepared for it.
What did you make of the other guys getting initiator opportunities? Jaden, he mentioned as, again, being a secondary playmaker. He brought up Terrence Shannon Jr. as handling some. That was kind of interesting. He was like, Terrence was on the third team. He was our point guard, primary initiator. Is that practice or whatever?
Or something,
Yeah. So that makes sense. The third group.
And also, to be fair, I thought he was, quite frankly, better than Dillingham at finding people in summer league.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, if you think of the times, he didn't play that last game, but I guess it was the first 3 games. He was scoring a lot, and then once that gravity came toward him, he did really well at getting off things. And so I do think that
he called it Nikhil-like playmaking abilities in him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's because Nikhil, if you go over last year's stats, or the year before for that matter, with any kind of objective what's going on here, Na was great. I mean, he was really valuable and in so many ways. And that's wishful thinking. If he thinks that Jaden McDaniels and TJ Shannon can Nikhil like, fine. But I think Nikhil,
he said Nikhil like playmaking abilities.
I know,
that
but
is
that's
not
what I mean.
Nikhil's top strength. I don't think he's saying that they can
defend.
like do all the Nikhil.
But I actually think Nikhil was once he got over his obsession with being the point guard in preseason last year, which bombed amazingly, and just settled down and played basketball. He was really good as a guy who moved along the offense, and he was
sure.
I mean, there was a reason why his net rating was so good with everybody he played with. He just was one of those guys that was always helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that had to do with the fact that, no, he wasn't flashy about it, but the ball moved better. Shot selection among his teammates was better. He did all the selfless things that Finch referenced. He was a cutter. He was a guy who pushed transition. He was a guy that took open shots immediately when they were there. And he was a guy with a sneaky first step to the rim and got to the rim. He's just really going to be missed, I think. It's interesting. The parallels with Kyle Anderson, I think, are there in terms of him being more intangibly valuable than tangibly valuable, even though he is very tangibly valuable. Which is a long detour into saying that TJ Shannon and Jaden McDaniels have their work cut out for them if the Wolves are going to match what Nikhil gave them in terms of ball movement and making plays.
Yeah. And I do think it is just needing to be pieces of Nikhil. They need to just be different pieces of Nikhil. And then Dante has some of that.
They're not going to have one guy replace him. Right.
Right.
And I do think it is time to find out if Jaden McDaniels is an incredibly versatile player or whether he just has moments when he's great at a variety of things.
See, I can envision this one a little bit more in that I don't think there's room for Jaden McDaniels to
get 20.
Just to get more playmaking opportunities with the starting group.
Right.
You know, when he's out there with
right.
Julius and Ant, that's just
Right.
You're not going to get it.
You're not.
And if Mike's out there or Dante, whatever, you just in that group, you're not.
Right.
But what if Jaden's timing that he plays repurposes into that like second unit? And the superpower of the team last year was, you know, in second, like late first quarter, second quarter, when the bench came in and it was Naz Reid, Dante DiVincenzo, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker.
Right.
They dominated those minutes last season.
Good point.
Can you make Jaden be the Nickeil in that? And in that second unit, you feel the thrust of Naz Reid, Dante DiVincenzo, and Jaden McDaniels. I need to map out the rotation or something like that, but I just see more runway for it than I have in the past. I mean, you did in the first 2 minutes of this. We did we'll see if Jaden gets it again or gets this opportunity that Finch has been saying for years that he wants to get, you know. I do think part of it was that the rosters in previous seasons did not allow it. It was an intention, as he'd said to you a year ago in this thing, to have Jaden be doing it.
Yes.
But then that got stopped by the Cat trade.
Right.
Because you brought in two more initiators, a huge one in Julius Randle and a supplemental one in DiVincenzo.
Right. And then you also had Mike clamoring for touches, which he didn't have to clamor for in the past. So it just, it made a lot of sense why he was shuttled to where he was shuttled. And I do, you know, you hear about it all the time. It happens more rarely than people realize. When people get hurt and you're thrust into situations, it oftentimes does not bloom the way you
Right.
hope. It turns out to be bad. But even though they went below 500, that was a rough slate of games when both Randall and Rudy were out, and they were playing Nas and Jaden, and switching off 4 and 5 between those two guys. Sure. I'm not saying you want that to be your identity going forward, but that is a hell of a audible you can call in the middle of games.
We
Here we go.
we loved it. We loved what it looked like and felt like when Nas and Jaden were out there. But I remember the numbers and the record in that time were awful.
Yeah, it were. But again, they were playing a lot of tough teams too.
Right.
I mean, the schedule did make a difference. But you're right. I mean, the newness of it was, everybody likes the new toy, the backup quarterback, whatever. I do think what I'm most interested in as we're toying with these backup lineups, what if TJ Shannon and Jaden McDaniels meshed?
Like turned into one person?
No,
that'd be cool.
Learned how to play off each other.
Yeah.
I mean, ran and hooped and switched off on defensive assignments. And there is a world where you have two swingmen who each have really some dog in different ways, two different kinds of dogs. That's when the dog should have barked. But I'm looking forward to perhaps seeing those minutes. If you do get Jaden McDaniels in that second unit configuration with Nas and Dante, a fourth on that it would be fun if it was TJ Shannon.
Today's show is brought to you by Skims. Skims you've heard of in the women's space. They're in the men's space. I've been telling you about it. They are specifically in the men's underwear space. Haha, that sounds funny. But like I've said before, these are so comfortable. They are the type of underwear that you can wear to the gym and you can wear at home and be comfortable. I have the stretch 5-inch boxer briefs, and they work just like workout shorts that I've worn in the past when I was playing basketball or going on runs. They're just significantly more comfortable. And that's what's unique about them, is they work at home and they work at the gym. I don't think you were doing that with your compression shorts before. I think you should try and find a pair that works for you. Like I said, the stretch 5-inch boxer briefs fit me. Be more comfortable. Shop Skims Men's at skims.com and at Skims stores. Let them know we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select our show in the drop-down menu that follows. Today's show is also brought to you by BetterHelp. We've all done it before. We've spent too much time talking to a friend or a bartender or a barber or a random stranger for life advice of something we're trying to work through in our life. And as fun as they may be to talk with about everyday topics, when you're looking for help about relationships, anxiety, depression, or other clinical issues, those people probably don't have all the right answers. Instead, get guidance from a credentialed therapist online with BetterHelp. BetterHelp is flexible. It's completely online, and you can pause your subscription whenever you need to and switch therapists at any time at no extra cost. And they're going to help you find the right match. BetterHelp has over 30,000 licensed therapists, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional cost. It's easy and effective. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Find the one with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off the first month at BetterHelp.com/DaneMoore. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/DaneMoore. Well, that leads to the next thing, which was paths to offensive improvement. I wrote it down. He talked about cutting, specifically sacrificial cutting, leaning more into a spread offense, because that's just kind of what he said you kind of need to do with Rudy, but also transition. And I think that's what you're talking about or envisioning here with the meshing of McDaniels and Shannon. Numbers say, obviously, they were terrible in transition last season. That's
typical.
And it's beyond low-hanging fruit. Like
cutting and transition and turnovers are the three thorns of the Finch era. They don't cut, they don't get out in transition, and they do turn the ball over. That has been in the Chris Finch era. That have been the three things that have been really hurtful for the team's offense.
And I would say it's the thing of Finch's stylistic preference that has most felt like square peg round hole, you
Exactly.
know, with this team, specifically in the half court. Transition that's
Well, he
less
wants
so
the
on a
cut.
coach.
He said to me right out front, I would love to be a cutting team. And he was visibly frustrated when I talked to him about transition.
Yeah.
I love this, we're passing backward. You do that in soccer. You don't do that in basketball. But you've got Ant, you've got Julius Randle, and you've got Rudy Gobert, and they are all crucial. And none of them, I mean, Rudy, bless him, runs the floor as much or better than anybody on the team. He just never gets rewarded because everybody knows he's got stone hands.
Yeah.
So, but I do think that you need to get out and transition. What smart readers who make comments after I linked the stuff on Twitter and Blue Sky have said, and is that when are we going to get Ant understanding exactly what Finch is saying about transition? Because,
I know the answer. I do. It's once he realizes it gets him 10 more points a game easily, and it's like
and
literally
makes him more of a playmaker to boot.
Sure, whatever. Once
Right.
Everything with Ant is once he
light
sees
goes
and
on, right.
feels the value of it, and maybe this one's a little bit more optimistic, but a connection with Rudy,
Right.
too. Like, I think there's a little bit of a tangent, but I think there's this potential, like, queen in the dark of Ant doing lobs with Baron J, in practice and stuff
Right,
like
right.
that, and just doing it with the player who Baron J, for other things that he's very raw in.
Right.
He's going to catch. He has really good hands. He's going to catch lob dunks and do that. And I think, like with Ant, who at Georgia or on this team pre-Rudy never had a lob threat.
Right.
And so his one lob threat in his basketball playing career is Rudy Gobert, who does not have good hands to catch those lobs, which then deters Ant from doing it. He needs like that positive affirmation of, I do this, it leads to this dunk, or now the next time I'm coming down, they're scared I might lob it to Rudy or Baron J here. I mean, it's going to be Rudy in the game, but I just think there's things like that with Ant that just then the light comes on and goes, I am going to take this low hanging fruit here, and I am going to throw lobs in that sort of way, or I am going to go get out in transition.
What was eye-opening to me, and it's always cool when you're talking to like an erudite, honest head coach about everything. It was such an obvious point, and I missed it. The last two Western Conference Finals opponents have stuffed the gaps. I mean, sold out.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought back to the Dallas team and what OKC did. They were not going to let Ant do anything with a head of steam.
Right.
And that's because they were able to do that because Ant doesn't go from 0 to 60. He goes from 0 to 20 and then 20 to 30 and then 30 to 40. And then he's over the half court line.
Right.
He needs to get the ball and fly and then survey. And that's what Finch was talking about.
He needs to do it in particular against those good defensive teams.
Exactly.
Because you go back to the Phoenix series, I would argue Phoenix jammed the gaps more than any team has ever jammed the gaps.
Yeah, but they had Royce O'Neal and nobody else.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
So that's what it's going to look like during the regular season, when that's probably just going to be the base defense they see. But you're playing, okay, cool. They're playing Brooklyn, and you got Michael Porter Jr. That's not the same thing as Alex Caruso.
Right.
In the gap there. So what Ant needs to do is kind of like develop this corporate knowledge of the habit. So it becomes,
that's what Finch was saying is, you can't suddenly, if you've been doing it the other way all year, you can't suddenly step on the gas and decide this is the way I'm doing it.
So even if he can slow it up in the half court and beat the bad defensive team, still just run and get it out in transition. And then it's still probably going to be easier. You can score in both ways, but take the path of least resistance is what I think his overall, I think that's just like Finch's overall ethos with all this stuff. But
there was a low-key sense, and it's very easy to say now. I mean, nothing has happened. The parties have not come together. Finch is going to be more demanding of Ant, I think, this year. And I think it's always tricky part 3, which is up today, talking now on Thursday, he talks about Ant quite a bit. You know, the best things about coaching and the worst things. It pretty much is a classic Barbara Walters. And you know, if you were a tree, what kind of tree would you be? But it's like these
that's your
answers.
inspiration for journalism for you, Barb.
She's known as an ace interviewer. Leave Barbara Walters alone. But
I were a tree.
Exactly. Well,
What
I
do you
mean,
think Ant
that
would
was
say?
kind of a fanciful example.
I know.
But the point being, Finch has been very, very good at keeping Ant's allegiance and continuing to get growth from Ant.
Mhm.
Ant has been very, very good about not using his incredible power to ever break roll and say, hey, I'm not too happy at the moment. Because the moment that happens, that's the butterfly effect ripple that makes a tsunami.
Because what's been happening now is, and I think some people would be like, what are you talking about, Britt? I see these clips or read these quotes of after a game and Ant seems outwardly unhappy. You know, I don't want to be a passer. I want to be a scorer. You know, that one after the Celtics
but it's
game.
all on himself.
And it goes away in 24 hours.
Right.
That is the, I mean,
usually was saying I was wrong.
it might even be 24 minutes.
Yeah,
like by the time he
right,
gets to the car, you know, at least for now, the things that irk Ant aren't sticky, you know? And so Finch has been able to kind of massage those and, you know, place them, as we'll talk about when we talk about Ant more, is that's going to get harder with age. Maybe some of that resistance.
And he knows it.
Yeah, he does.
I mean, Finch knows it. And I mean, one of the things we will talk about it later, but when I said a couple of the things that are hard to talk about, a couple of things that are hard to coach with Ant, one of them was he's stubborn like all fantastic athletes are. But the other one was I have to give him more and more room. I mean, he's got to continue to roam. And he said that as like a kind of a negative. And from Finch's viewpoint, of course it is. I don't have as much control over him, but I have no choice. But I've got to keep giving this guy. This is the NBA. I'm giving our superstar, who he just got through saying, gives you a chance to win every night, like very few others. You can't say, oh, I want you to do that, all that cool stuff, but listen to me on X, Y, and Z. It just doesn't work.
This is the mid-range thing. This is what the mid-range thing is going to be this year. Ant's going to want to do it, and Finch is not going to be a zero tolerance guy.
As long as it's a go-to move that works in the closing minutes, maybe he will.
Sure.
I mean, if Finch says, okay,
oh yeah,
if that's going to be if you're going to win games for us by having the discipline to basically get to your spot and make that shot,
right?
Show me. I'm on board with that.
I think he wants it to be a finishing move. He wants it to be like a finishing move that, you know,
he wants a patented closing. And in some respects, I think that is a really smart strategy because that would appeal to Ant.
Sure.
It's like having his own shoe, only it's on the court.
With the transition thing, to wrap that up, quote, it is more than just Ant is what Finch said. Of course, we want Ant to have the ball, but trying to get him to understand too, that if you always want to bring the ball up, you're always going to face the most loaded defense, as you were saying, particularly if you are bringing it up at half speed. So yes, Ant, all of those things there, but to improve, they were 27th in transition frequency. To improve the frequency in which, or increase the frequency in which they get out in transition, it needs to be a global, you know, intention by everyone on the roster. It needs to be the intention of the guy who gets the defensive rebound.
Yes.
And that can include Rudy. I'm not saying Rudy go dribble,
right.
But that's grab, quick hit ahead pass. There's Mike, there's TJ, there's whatever. Let's go.
And I actually think that the outlets, by the way, they did miss Cat with that because Cat was actually very good at a quick outlet.
Mm-hmm.
But
good in transition when he passed, not when he dribbled it himself.
Absolutely. Yeah. I do think that it is less the outlet than I think that it's the middle. It's like from foul line to foul line is where they don't play well. They're not quick. And I don't think it's the paint. I think it's getting the ball out and then looking up. And the problem is if you look up, there's two guys next to you. There's not enough people They need to get it on, and this is kind of what Finch was intimating. We need to get on the page where a guy gets the ball and he sees three options streaking up the floor.
Yeah.
And that, he says, Julius expects to have the ball, or when he doesn't post up, he goes to the corner.
Mm-hmm.
Mike expects to have the ball because he's the point guard and expects to have the ball. So you have three guys who all, by the way, should be able to finish well, hanging around.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, Rudy's running up the floor. No one wants to pass it to him. Yeah. I mean, it's a screwed up priority.
I don't know. Maybe I just have like football brain right now, but it reminds me of like Jalen Hurts and the Eagles, right? Mm-hmm. They don't want to throw that. Right. Like long, it's all this underneath stuff, or like a young Michael Penix, young guys like that. You're throwing all this underneath stuff. You're not trying to get out and go. The thing is I think the Wolves, to extend this weird analogy, like do have the personnel to run, to be able to go, to be able to throw the ball deep, take the top off the defense. But that has to start with the quarterbacks, I think, in the basketball sense, which are Ant and Julius. I would say Jaden too. The guys who can grab it and take it coast to coast themselves, or grab it and get it going up the floor. They need to look down the field because they can make those throws.
And if I'm not mistaken, Jaden McDaniels was really good in transition in the playoffs, and he's always been really good in the postseason. But I think in particular, I mean, the way he got so many points in that Lakers game where he broke out was just beating people down the floor because they were a slow team.
Sure.
I really see, and Finch does too, a lot of possibilities there. It is bewildering, to kind of put a bow on this, that a player as athletic and showtime ready as Anthony Edwards is a reluctant transition player.
Telling you, man, he just doesn't get the value of it yet.
Yeah.
I do think that light's going to come on. How could it not?
If it does, I will tell you.
I don't know when, but like
if it does come on, prospects for the Timberwolves going deeper dramatically increase. It's like having, that solves a lot of things. It is that transition and turnovers are just two of the things that just are crazy about this team. And so
that's a good place to leave it for this one with transition. We got a lot more, basically parts 3 and 4 to get into here. Again, maybe if you're listening to this on Thursday evening, well, I guess part 3 is out. These won't all be out yet, but go, like I said at the beginning, you can go back and read these. I can't read off all the quotes. There's way more good quotes in here that I could read off on the episode. So we're going to take a pause here, end this episode, and we will come back with the next episode tomorrow, and we'll get more into Ant, the rotation, Randall, DiVincenzo, and then some of the other smaller pieces on the roster. Again, it's up at MimPost. You can find it on Britt's Twitter at Britt Robson. Until the next episode with Britt. He's Britt. I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah. Hope you dancing.